notices this week. Those folks need to know that the eviction prevention and housing programs are in place. There are folks sleeping on the streets amidst a code blue, and New Yorkers need to know that those folks can come off the streets into shelter and into warmth. Amidst all of that, there are going to be fires, some sadly caused by people using space heaters in buildings that haven't had heat week after week. And New Yorkers are going to need to know that the FDNY is out there ready to respond, that police are ready to respond to 911 calls. And look, all of the agencies that I just talked about, the NYPD, the FDNY, the Department of Homeless Services, the Department of Sanitation, all report to the 4 deputy mayors who submitted their resignations yesterday. Now, this week, those 4 deputy mayors are still in place. They are consummate professionals. I have high regard for all 4 of Deputy Mayors Torres Springer, Joshi, Williams-Isom, and Parker. So this week, New Yorkers know that when that snowstorm hits, they've got a deputy mayor who has supervised the Department of Sanitation and is ready to respond. They've got someone as deputy mayor of public safety who's worked with the new commissioner at the fire department and the new commissioner at the NYPD to make sure we can maintain that continuity. Deputy Mayor Williams-Isom has been leading the Department of Homeless Services and the Office of Asylum Seeker Operations since the beginning of the Adams administration, and she is ready to deploy the teams that respond in a code blue. So this week, there is that strong, steady, competent leadership in place that means New Yorkers can rely on the services they expect to keep them safe, to confront crises, and to deliver services. Unfortunately, the resignation letters create an unprecedented leadership vacuum in the weeks to come. And we don't know when it's going to hit because they haven't yet said what specific date they would tender their resignations. Their resignations would be effective. But there has never been a leadership vacuum like this at New York City Hall in living memory. And in the weeks beyond this one, we're going to face new challenges and crises. There's increasing concern about bird flu. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene reports to Deputy Mayor Williams-Isom, what does it look like for them to be ready for that crisis? The Trump administration is likely to continue to freeze federal funding and impose budget cuts and put the budget at risk. Will the leadership team be ready to respond when those cuts hit and make sure continuity of services can be maintained? Some of those cuts are likely to hit the New York City Housing Authority, where 500,000 New York City residents already experience a lack of heat too often in the wintertime. What will happen if that happens when there's not a deputy mayor with experience leading the housing agencies, like Deputy Mayor Torres Springer has now been doing for years? None of those questions are answered today, and they must be answered. We cannot have the leadership vacuum that is consuming City Hall remain. That's why yesterday I wrote to Mayor Adams to ask for a clear contingency plan. What is he going to do to deal with the resignation of 4 deputy mayors who supervise the agencies that New Yorkers rely on every single day, and especially in crises? And if he fails or refuses to provide a clear contingency plan for how New Yorkers can rely on the services that make this city run, then, as I said, I will be reaching out to other members of the Committee on Mayoral Inability to discuss the question of whether the mayor can discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor as outlined under Section 9 of the New York City Charter. That is what I will be talking about today, this afternoon, with Governor Hochul. That's what I'll be talking about in coming days with the Committee on Mayoral Inability. And that's what New Yorkers need to know, is how is the city going to guarantee a continuity of the operations and services that they rely on, again, every single day, from something as simple as the garbage getting picked up to what happens in snowstorms, what happens in emergencies, what happens in crisis, you really start to appreciate what an extraordinary city this is. The 300,000 people who go to work every day to keep it safe, to educate our kids, to deliver all of the services from the water we drink to the garbage getting picked up. Those employees need to know what the continuity plan is, and New Yorkers need to know. I want to step back for just 1 minute and talk about how we got here, and then just a little about how we're going forward. In September, when the indictments hit, I was amongst the people that called at that time for Mayor Adams to resign. And I said at that time, his need to defend himself is in conflict with, is incompatible with his ability to put the time and attention necessary to govern and lead this city. There's just a conflict between his own interest and the interests of New Yorkers. And unfortunately, that has only proven to be more and more and more true in recent days. We saw this as he began to seek a pardon from Donald Trump and made it quite clear that he would be putting his own interests, not just his time and attention, but his own interests ahead of the interests of New Yorkers. That then became even clearer last week when the Justice Department turned the process of so-called justice into a kind of hostage-taking and made clear right out in public for everyone that his case dismissal was contingent on his doing their bidding on immigration and who knows what else. And then obviously yesterday it rose to a whole new level when the deputy mayors who oversee the critical city agencies have indicated that they cannot continue to serve with a mayor who's being held hostage in this corrupt way. New Yorkers need to know what the plan is to deliver the services that they rely on. And let's just get back to that. I mean, at the beginning and the end, what our job is in city government is to make sure that New Yorkers have the services that they rely on for their safety and protection, for their quality of life, for the basic services that make New York City run. And that really is where we should begin and end, with, as elected officials, our duties under the city charter, which are laid out there, and with the sacred responsibility that we have to all of you and every New Yorker to make sure that whether it's a snowstorm or whether it's a fire or whether it's an emergency or whether it's bird flu or whether it's the simple day-to-day services that you count on your block and your neighborhood, you've got the strong, steady, proven leadership to make sure that those services are provided. That's what my job is to help oversee as New York City Controller. That's what the job of the mayor is designed to do. That's what the job of those 4 deputy mayors who have shown talent and experience in their work and who showed courage yesterday is. And that's what I'll be talking about with the governor, with the other committee members, and with New Yorkers in the days to come. Thank you.
Wait, Dan, nice try, but you did this last week. Marcia, I saw your hand up.
Mr. Controller, I wonder what your take is on the decision by Governor Hochul to start calling people in. I know you're going to be meeting with her today. I wonder what you will tell her, and what do you think your way, which is to impanel the committee of mayoral ability, is better, or she has a better chance of taking action because she has the power under the state constitution to remove the mayor?
Look, I'm largely going to talk with the governor about the exact same set of things I just set out, and I'm talking about with you. Like, first and foremost, how are we ensuring New Yorkers get the services and the government they deserve? Like, let's just always begin and end with that. The political drama of the moment might distract some people, but I know that the governor and I are thinking, how do we ensure good continuity of government to make sure we're ready for each one of those activities? That's why, what I put in my letter yesterday to the mayor was, what is the contingency plan? In September, the governor rightly said, we need to make sure that strong leadership is in place. And now, Deputy Mayor Torres Springer and Commissioner Tisch and Commissioner Tucker and others have been providing that leadership. Some doubted whether that would happen. It did happen. So, there's a set of questions around, what the mayor will say in response to that letter. Obviously, there's a set of questions around what will happen in court, which is a separate issue that's not under the city or the governor's control, but that is relevant as well for how things play out. And yes, I'll be talking with the governor about what the Committee of Mayoral Inabilities, function is, how it works. It has not been called in quite some time, so what I can share with the governor my understanding as a member of that committee of what its powers, authorities, and timeline would be as we see what happens.
Can I just follow up? So I understand from talking to people in close to the governor that the goal here is to create some space that would allow the mayor to make some decisions that might make it, that you wouldn't have to take action and she wouldn't have to take action. I wonder what you think the possibility is for this, creating space for him to reconsider his position and either resign, decide not to run for re-election, or any of the possible options open to him.
I mean, look, the way I think of this is, how do we ensure continuity of good government? So, that was why my approach yesterday in my letter was to ask him to outline what the plan is. And yes, I mean, I've said over and over again that I think he should resign. So if he were to write back and say, my plan is to submit my resignation and ask those deputy mayors to stay so that they can keep providing the services to New Yorkers, I can't say that's what I expect the response will be, but that would be a response that guaranteed continuity of services to New Yorkers. If he has a different plan for what he will do in the face of the resignation of these deputy mayors, he needs to lay it out. And if he doesn't lay it out, then conversations have to continue about how to make sure that those duties are met.
Yes.
So Brett, procedurally, how does the inability committee work? What are the nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah. And not all of that. It doesn't have a chair. It's not, but it only has 5 members, and 4 of them we know who they are. The 5th would be a deputy mayor appointed by the mayor, but the other 4 we know who they are. We all know each other, and so as laid out in Section 10 of the city charter, 4 of the 5 members have to agree and then certify and submit in writing that they believe that the mayor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor. And if that happens, it is then transmitted in writing to the city council, and then the city council would have 21 days to vote on whether they concur. 2/3 vote of the council is required.
But is there like a hearing? Does the mayor make his own case? Is there criteria? How do you vote on that?
So, these are all good questions. The charter does not prescribe a public hearing for the committee. It is a public entity, and therefore meetings of that entity would be subject to various open meetings rules. It is not prescribed in the charter. The definitions of inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor are not specified beyond that, and so the inability committee would need to work with attorneys and consult on clear rationale and definitions, for what is inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor. It is prescribed how it is transmitted. 4 of the members, at least 4 of the 5 members, would need to affirm in writing the decision that they have come to the conclusion that the mayor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, and then transmit that to the city council for the questions up in advance of that, of precisely how those definitions would be made and provided. The committee would have to do it.
Bridget?
Can't we? got a newly married. Oh, so, all right. Congratulations. Anyway, go ahead. We'll get to Jeff. All right. Sorry.
Controller, just an easy question first. What time are you meeting with the governor today?
This afternoon.
Okay, and then, my understanding of the history of the inability committee is that it dates back to the Koch administration when Mayor Koch had a stroke. The set of circumstances surrounding its legislative history seem very different than the moment we're in. So can you talk a little bit about that and any of the legal advisors who've been involved in helping you figure out how this process will work?
Yeah. You're right about the history of when it was brought into being, but it doesn't speak to infirmity or illness. What it speaks to is an inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor. That's the language that's provided, and the members, and in consultation with our lawyers, will have to address that question: what constitutes inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office? And one can imagine a set of medical conditions that would make someone unable to perform the powers and duties of the office. Then there's a question of what's temporary and what's permanent. Whether the combination of Justice Department jeopardy and leadership vacuum created by the resignation of half the deputy mayors constitutes an inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office. This is the open question that we're assigned by the charter to deal with. And I'm not giving you an answer to it today. That's why yesterday's letter, I didn't say the committee should meet. Yesterday I said the mayor needs to provide a contingency plan for how he's going to replace those deputy mayors to be able to discharge the powers and duties of the office. And if he doesn't do that, then we'll proceed in conversation. I have been talking to my general counsel, Justina Rivera, here at the Comptroller's office, and she and her team advise me on questions of our duties under the charter. Obviously, the Corporation Counsel is a lawyer herself, and of course, Speaker Adams and Borough President Richards have attorneys who advise them. The committee itself doesn't have a unitary, it's not an existing entity, so we would have to discuss amongst each other how each of our attorneys assess and how we each assess the question of the definition of inability, how we would come to a common decision, how that common decision would then be drafted and supported, what kind of consultation with the mayor or senior aides or New Yorkers would be needed, and how to make and finalize such a decision. So, we're in unprecedented waters in so many ways, but all of those things are the things that the committee would need to do.
Just a quick follow-up. Following up on Marcia's question, do you think that this path is preferable to the governor taking action herself and removing him?
I'm not yet ready to opine on that. I think again, yesterday's letter was to ask the mayor to present a contingency plan. And again, because I've called on him to resign, my preferred contingency plan would be he concludes that he is not able to perform the duties of the office. He thinks the deputy mayors are doing a great job, and in the interests of New Yorkers, he's submitting his resignation and encouraging the interim mayor to keep those deputy mayors in place to ensure continuity of government. That if you're asking what response I would like to see, my preferred response would be that one. I resign. I hope the 4 deputy mayors will stay in place and guarantee New Yorkers the continuity of government that they deserve. That would be a strong answer. If he has a different answer, we'll consider it. Our standards, and if he doesn't, then we'll have to go down the path of considering what our responsibility is as members of the Inability Committee, and yes, in dialogue with the governor, assess what the different paths would be. While all of that is taking place, the court process will also be playing out. I saw that an amicus brief was filed yesterday, pushing, encouraging Judge Ho, not to dismiss the case in the way that the Justice Department has presented it. So more things are going to happen in the coming weeks. My job is to do everything I can to make sure that, you know, I'm fulfilling my duties under the charter and guaranteeing New Yorkers the strong and stable leadership they deserve.
Yeah, Dan.
I can appreciate the philosophical ponderings of the nature of ability versus inability, but for regular Joes and Janes, inability is a physical inability. The mayor gets a stroke, he is incapacitated. Why does this political five-person troika make a political judgment of what is an ability and what is an inability?
I mean, I guess I don't agree with you on the definition of the words of what ability and inability are. I mean, there is a physical, I don't think it's philosophical. I mean, to me, is the mayor able to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor under the city charter at this time is a very real question that lots of New Yorkers are asking. I mean, I'm talking to them every day, and they're saying, how do I know about whether the garbage is going to get picked up, whether we're ready for that snowstorm? If these deputy mayors leave, are we able to deliver the services? Is the mayor able, under the current conditions, to do his job? And I would just submit those are all questions the New Yorkers are asking, and that is a question that Section 10 of the Charter assigns to a set of people. And did they envision this particular set of circumstances? They did not envision this particular set of circumstances. But they said, what if the mayor's not able to do the job? And there are 5 people whose responsibility it is to figure out answers to that question.
So my follow-up then is this your view of government that every agency commissioner needs a deputy mayor to tell Jimmy Otto to send out the salt spreaders or Jessica Tisch to patrol a neighborhood? These commissioners are working. Conceivably, are you going to have like a deputy mayor for every agency? I mean, it seems like
well, this is my question to the mayor. So if the mayor wants to say, here is the plan to operate City Hall without deputy mayors or without deputy mayors governing key agencies, this has not been done in decades, but here's how it's going to work, then I'll read that contingency plan. I mean, he could say, here's the way in which each of those agencies will continue to function and with their commissioners, and even though we have said deputy mayors are necessary to provide leadership, here's how we'll provide the services without it. That's what I asked for yesterday in the letter, was not like the names of the new deputy mayors, but was a contingency plan for the continuity of government. And to me, that's what the ability of the mayor to perform his powers and duties under the charter is. So it's not mine to tell him how to do that, but it is his to communicate how he's going to do it in the face of this unprecedented leadership vacuum. Every mayor, for as long as I can remember, has relied, the city is too big for any one person to be able to supervise all those commissioners. So it's not a question of, does, you know, Jimmy Otto know to send out the salt spreaders? I mean, I think Jimmy Otto is great. Obviously, we disagree ideologically on plenty of things, but I have long respected his public service and his leadership. But he is a relatively new sanitation commissioner, and I'd feel more comfortable with a deputy mayor that had been through a lot of snowstorms, working with him to make sure that they're able to provide the plans. And again, there's just so many other things going on. You've got a Code Blue at the same time, so what's the relationship between that and the outreach work to make sure people aren't freezing to death on the street? And when you have cold spells like this, you have more fires. Unfortunately, because people use space heaters in buildings without heat. And are these plans integrated? And can New York City respond? That's what these deputy mayors do, especially when there are situations that are more like a crisis than an ordinary one. And I think it is entirely, not just reasonable, but necessary that there's a clear plan in place for what will happen when these deputy mayors leave.
Did that happen in September when we were having this conversation in September when all the federal, when the indictment landed, subpoenas went out? Deputy mayors resigned.
The governor did exactly this. The governor stepped up and said, I want to make sure there's continuity of government operations. New leaders came into place, and some of them, you know, as I've said, I think, you know, Jesse Tisch, Bob Tucker, and Maria Torres Springer are doing a great job. So I'm not answering the question, I'm asking the question. The governor played a critical role in that last time. She's playing a critical role in it this time. Obviously, I think at this point, with the resignation of the deputy mayors and the dramatic uncertainty created by the Justice Department decisions, move us closer to the question of whether the mayor is able to discharge the powers and duties of the office, or I wouldn't have written the letter the way I did yesterday. But my hope is that those questions will be answered in ways that guarantee the services keep being provided.
Okay, Annie.
Thank you. Because we're talking about the possibility of removal, the possibility of resignation, if there were a special election, would you run in it potentially against Jemima Williams?
Really not prepared to answer that question today. Like, my focus here right now is, getting the answers from the mayor by Friday on a plan for the continuity of government operations, and just helping make sure the city is ready to weather this crisis. I am continuing to run, and I will be continuing to talk to voters and put my plans out and talk to people about the vision of the city I have. I mean, this has made New Yorkers more hungry than ever for a well-run city hall that can actually guarantee a safer and more affordable city. So part of the reason I'm running is that I have not believed, and I really don't believe now, and I think New Yorkers don't believe, that Eric Adams can provide the kind of leadership the city needs. So that will take place in campaigning. But right now, my focus for today is on the continuity of city services that we've got to guarantee.
Do you know yet whether you run, or you're just not saying today?
We don't know. I mean, there's so much we don't know today. Like, if the mayor resigns and a special election is called, then I'll be glad to tell you whether I'm running in it or not. But until then, I'll try to focus on what's in front of me.
Yes, Sam.
Excuse me. I was curious about how you're going to assess the contingency plan to say whether it's good enough or meets the standard that you have, and how, if at all, does Adams' independence or possible ability to fund play in?
Yeah. I have to see it. I can't say that we have an existing rubric for evaluating contingency plans when 4 of the 8 deputy mayors resign. We have standards and dashboards for many things, but that is not yet one of them. But look, what happened last time was pretty quickly clearly qualified individuals were discussed and appointed into jobs. And, I've known Maria Torres Springer for many years, so when she became first deputy mayor, it was easy to assess that she was qualified for that job. It was clear that Jesse Tisch and Commissioner Tucker are qualified. So some of that is going to be who individuals are that are identified. If there are some structural changes, we'll look and see, does that seem plausible? Obviously, we have to get something at all and see, the mayor's remarks yesterday obviously were not encouraging. Rather than say, here's how I will reassure New Yorkers, I have a plan in place to respond to the resignation of my deputy mayors. He used gross and offensive language and attacks on the character of the public advocate, in a way that undermined public trust and confidence. That did not give us confidence that there's a strong contingency plan in place for continuity of government. So what he will do by Friday, we have to see. In terms of the court questions, I mentioned this before. Those are separate from my duties under the charter. Like, my duties under the charter are the fiscal health and efficiency and effective operation of city government. What happens in court is certainly relevant to the question of how New Yorkers think about whether their mayor is working for them or for Donald Trump, and Judge Ho has to take that into consideration. I thought the amicus brief filed yesterday that raises those questions in a way that he can answer because they've been put before him in court are interesting, and they're certainly relevant to that question. But to me, that's less a responsibility of the controller and of the members of the Committee on Mayoral Inability than the contingency plan.
But doesn't that affect what happens in the city?
Yes. No. Yes, absolutely. I think it does. I think it's an important set of factors that the governor will consider, that the members of that I will consider, that other members of the Inability will consider, and the New Yorkers will consider. It's absolutely a relevant set of questions and information that's needed to figure out how we ensure the integrity and quality of city government. I only meant to say that my specific duties under the charter speak to the management of city agencies.
Given the issues that Maria Torres Springer and the other deputy mayors raised yesterday in the resignation letter
Well, now the question that was just asked is relevant. You know, if you were asked to be first deputy mayor, I would guess it would be a pretty different situation depending on what Judge Ho does. You know, the way I understand what the deputy mayors said yesterday, these are deputy mayors who chose to serve after the indictments, you know, and I really respect them for doing so. They were not implicated in the issues surrounding the indictments, so they've been able to deliver for New Yorkers in the months since September. I mean, let's take Maria Torres Springer, who delivered City of Yes. So Mayor Adams was not able to step up and deliver City of Yes as a result of the indictments and his distraction. But he had a great first deputy mayor in place who had been deputy mayor for housing and economic development, and she did the work to get it across the finish line. So he did discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor by having someone in place who delivered historic and important progress on housing. And that's to her credit, and he gets the leadership, you know, the benefit of having had her in that position. Now she is saying, as I understand it, given the status of the Justice Department and the sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the entire administration, if it doesn't do Trump administration bidding, she can't serve. Maybe that will change if Judge Ho says, I won't dismiss the case in that way. Then perhaps someone will step up and say, I can do what she and those deputy mayors have been doing for the past few months and serve with integrity under these conditions. And I mean, it's extraordinary, the people that want to serve this city and the integrity that they have. And I really give these 4 deputy mayors credit, but they're 4 out of 300,000 people that go to work for New York City every day. And I feel lucky and blessed to do it, and under the right conditions, people will provide extraordinary service to this city. Again, my first preference would be these 4 of them stay and he goes, and let's see what happens.
How was it communicated to you from the governor office that she wanted to meet today? Did you do to think anything about her seriousness about removal?
The governor's office reached out to my team last night to arrange the meeting today. I read the governor's statement, and I think it shows a very appropriate seriousness on the set of questions we're talking about here. I mean, the governor is committed to making sure those services and continuity of government are provided. She did that in September. A lot of these questions were raised in September in a different moment when it was really more about, in my opinion, the time and attention of the mayor. I mean, at that point, my concern was not corruption of the Justice Department and a sort of Damocles, or it was, does the mayor have the time and attention necessary to do the job? And she stepped in and said, there's got to be some new leadership. New leaders were put in place, and so I was not at all surprised to see her step up with that same set of questions and concerns last night.
Mr. Mondrone, we talked a little bit about it. You're running for mayor. You're very close to Jumaane Williams. Isn't this just a nakedly political pretext to get rid of a mayor that's too conservative on immigration policy that you disagree with?
No. I mean, first of all, let me say mazel tov on your wedding. No. I mean, in no way. I mean, New Yorkers are concerned about their government, and nothing has happened like this in our lifetimes. It is an unprecedented leadership vacuum to have these 4 deputy mayors submit their resignation. Nothing like that has happened. And it's unprecedented to have the Justice Department hold White House policy, tell the mayor to put White House policy over the interests of New Yorkers as he would judge it under the charter. Nothing like those 2 things that has ever happened. Certainly one piece of wisdom of this Committee on Mayoral Inability is that it goes far beyond anyone's individual interests or politics. If 4 members of that committee, which would have to include not just me, and not just the independent Speaker of the City Council, and not just the independently elected, longest-serving borough president, but also either the corporation council appointed by the mayor or a deputy mayor of the mayor's choosing, if 4 of those 5 people were to determine that the mayor's failure to articulate a contingency plan and other circumstances constitute an inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office of the mayor, it would be entirely about whether he can lead in a way that New Yorkers require.
And have you seen any actual service effects specifically so far, or has government been running smoothly enough?
Well, all those deputy mayors are still in place. So as I think I started by saying, we're going to have a bunch of things this week that need City Hall leadership. And this week, I have confidence that it will be provided. Those deputy mayors, despite having given this resignation letter, are showing up for work and leading this city, and I have confidence in them. And so I wouldn't be looking yet. This really is and let's give them credit to say, we can't continue to serve in these positions under these conditions, but we know continuity of government matters, so we will stick around until a plan is put in place to guarantee that continuity. So all I'm doing is trying to, in this case, back them up and make sure that their offer of ensuring that continuity is actually provided.
Jeff?
Hey, Controller. City government is quite elastic. The mayor just named 2 brand new deputy mayors. What if his plan is just to promote upwards from within, and that is his contingency plan? So I'm not sure about why there's such an emphasis on a contingency plan. It feels like you can just sort of create upward. The other question I have is, I'm wondering, inability, there seems to be disagreement among legal experts on whether that's just physical disability. Do you believe that inability goes beyond physical status? And then finally, the inability committee has not been tested, and as you mentioned, would it just be easier for the governor just to step in and actually remove him, given the sort of concerns you've raised about the quality of city government, the fidelity of city government towards the people? So.
Yeah, fair questions all. On the first one, certainly promotions might be an entirely plausible, Deputy Mayor Torres Springer already was a deputy mayor. She was deputy mayor for housing and economic development and was promoted to first deputy mayor, and everyone, myself included, thought that was an entirely appropriate contingency plan. So, of course, people gain variety of experience, and so I'm not presuming what it would be. Not everything is interchangeable, so there are good deputy mayors who have the ability to do their current position, who I wouldn't think would be appropriate to supervise the NYPD or other city agencies. So this gets to the definition of ability, which I'll come to in just a minute. But no, but I think New Yorkers can see whether the plans seem plausible. Again, yesterday the mayor had a chance to say, here's how I'm dealing with the resignation of 4 of my 8 deputy mayors. And I don't think anyone would say that was a way that would give you trust and confidence that he's taking it seriously and has a plan to address it. So, this is not quibbling about the details in which individuals, but there's a difference between a plausible contingency plan that speaks to running the city and an offensive screed that does not indicate any interest in running the city. So let's see what happens. I feel like that's what's just got to be put in play. I believe that, ability or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office goes beyond physical, infirmity. I'll give you an example or two. Let's just say someone left the city and said, I'm going to go on vacation to Hawaii for 6 months. They might be perfectly well health-wise, but they would not be able. That would be inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office. So there are conditions beyond physical health. The charter, the provision doesn't say anything about physical health, and there are provisions beyond it. There aren't clear definitions about what it is and whether it's being met here, and I haven't opined on that either. But I think those discussions are appropriate under the circumstances. And your third question was?
Because the inability committee hasn't been voted.
Oh, I mean,
People aren't, shouldn't the governor?
look, here's what I'd say. Like, I mean, I have a duty under the city charter as a member of the inability committee. Like, I take my charter duties seriously. That's what we wake up here every day and like manage the pension funds for New Yorkers and make sure the bond financing is in place so that we can do the investments in our housing and our roads, and we settle the claims and put out the audits. Like, I got a set of duties under the charter, and I take them seriously. Section 10 gives me a duty under the charter as a member of the Committee on Mayoral Inability to assess this set of questions. And that's the role I acted in yesterday when I wrote the letter. And I'll, have a conversation with the governor that's in the shared interest of delivering services to New Yorkers. But I have to approach it from the duties that I'm assigned.
Will you encourage the governor to remove them?
I mean, I'm going to share with the governor the same set of things I've shared with you, what my concerns are, what the things I would like to see in place, what I'd love to see happen, what the things are that would address my concerns, and how I'll think about my duties as a member. And I'll be interested to see what she has to say and what plan she provides. Obviously, the governor is both a higher and more unitary level of leadership than myself and members of the Committee on Inability have, and that's appropriate and as it should be. That's why I'm going to her, and we're not meeting elsewhere. But I think it's just too soon. It's too soon to answer any of those questions.
Hi, how are you? I'm wondering how you address concerns that removing Adams from office is potentially anti-democratic since voters agreed to put him in office in 2021, and he's acting within the powers of his office now, even if it's not something you or even most people may agree with.
Yeah.
And then my second question is whether you have any concern that the results of the inability committee, if there are results, are potentially legally susceptible because of that definition of physical or non-physical.
Yeah, I mean, again, first of all, what I did yesterday was ask for a contingency plan, and what I hope to see is a good contingency plan. I mean, again, my preferred contingency plan would be the mayor resigns and the 4 deputy mayors stay. That is a contingency plan, and I'd like to see it. If the mayor articulates a different contingency plan that demonstrates his ability to perform the duties of the office and meet New Yorkers' needs, then there wouldn't even be a meeting of the committee. If none of that happens, if there is no adequate contingency plan put in place, and if things keep going in a direction that jeopardize the functioning of New York City government, and that speak in a fairly plain way that he's not able to discharge those duties, then still the following things would have to happen. 4 of those 5 people would have to agree collectively that it meets the standard of inability to discharge the powers and duties of the office in the way that it would if he were in the hospital or left New York City for many months. And then 2/3 of the elected city council would have to affirm it. That's a high bar, and it's a bar of democratically elected officials doing their duty as prescribed by the city charter, so no one would take it lightly. No one has commenced that process. No one wants that process. So as for whether things would get litigated, many things get litigated, but that's part of why, if that process is to proceed, it'll be done with a lot of thoughtfulness and attention to the laws of the charter and a lot of consultation with other elected officials and each other. Again, that is not the outcome anyone wants. What we want is a guarantee of the continuity of services that New Yorkers deserve.
Yes, I just want to follow up. So the contingency plan that you're asking for, is that required legally in some way or under the charter, or is that just something you're asking for?
I mean, the charter says pretty little. The charter says the committee assesses whether the mayor is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. And it is really not defined. It's not defined what that means in medical terms, and what, it's not defined. Correct. No, I mean, to me, yesterday's letter that I wrote was me asking the mayor the charter didn't envision that 4 of 8 deputy mayors would resign yesterday. So when that happened, I talked to my lawyer, I talked to my team. What do we do? This has never happened before. How do we assess whether the mayor is able to continue to govern? And one thing we...
Sort of laying the groundwork for inability to say there's no contingency plan, so he's unable to execute the duties of his office.
I mean, I guess, if the mayor's only responses to the resignation of his 4 deputy mayor mirror what he did yesterday, on offensive rant with no attention to the continuity of his government, and that continues, I would probably reach a point where I would say he's unable to do the job, and I think most New Yorkers would agree. Hopefully it will go down a different path, but...
He just appoints new deputy mayors. Does that solve the problem?
I mean, I think these are good questions. What a contingency plan is. Can he get those deputy mayors? Do those deputy mayors feel comfortable given the legal circumstances, or all the things we're going to have to see in the coming days, which is why I asked him for the plan.
Okay.
I just wonder what your sense of how successful you would be in doing this, given the fact that you have to have 4 of the 5 people, and 2 of the appointees are mayoral appointees.
I mean, I think this speaks to the fact that the ball is in the mayor's court. Again, I ask you to do the thought experiment. Like, there's a version of a contingency plan which comes back, which people would say, that's a solid plan. Does that involve shifts in what's happening in his legal jeopardy? Maybe it does. You can imagine a path down which you would say, okay, I might not love it, that might not be my favorite set of choices, but that doesn't demonstrate inability. And down another path, if every response he has to the situation we're in is like what he had yesterday, I think there's a path where most New Yorkers would say, that is a mayor who is unable to govern, and which way it will go is in the hands of Eric Adams.
Do you think really that this is just another step in building the pressure? Because you're calling for this committee on mayoral ability adds to what the governor's doing, and adds to all the people who are calling for this resignation. So is this just another thing that puts more pressure on him to reconsider the job and whether he should be doing it? And it's just another step because there's been such a plethora of people and things demanding.
I hope it puts pressure on him to put the needs of New Yorkers first. That is his sworn responsibility under the city charter and what he was elected to do. And if this puts pressure on him to put the interests of New Yorkers first, then I'm doing my job.
Is
Great,
this
guys.
press conference like mine, Tom?
I mean,
Guys, I think, I just want to say, I think that was going to be our last question. We've gone on for a while. I